most recently, you have provided surface situational awareness to air traffic control towers across US airports. I saw that announcement and I'm like, holy shnikes. So tell us about this, and how does that fit into kind of this larger ecosystem that you all have curated over time?
Great, right. Yeah. So, we've got a rich history in understanding ADSB, right? And both the broadcast of that as well as the receipt of it. So it was a natural extension as we, use that leverage, if you will, from an understanding perspective to deliver something to air traffic controllers, essentially at underserved airfields to really help with collision avoidance, right? In this case, the focus was on collision avoidance between aircraft, potential vehicles on the ground as well that are part of the airport, and within the radius of the airport itself. And so we're very pleased to be a part of that program, the Surface Awareness Initiative with the FAA. But everyone looked at it and said, well, what are you guys doing over there, right? I thought you were helping out with UAS, or I thought you were developing displays and the like for the general aviation community. The reality is that capability, right, which is able to detect aircraft, essentially, in this case, cooperative aircraft, is very key to us enabling drone corridors and other operating areas and centers where we might be trying to do drone delivery services, or perhaps we're launching a drone as a first responder program. And what's important about it is that this is something that's coming from the FAA, right? They went through a very, very rigorous test procedure with us, a very rigorous proposal procedure to say, okay, we trust in this, and we're going to allow this to be deployed at these control towers, essentially. So we're taking that pedigree, if you will, and now we're going to be able to pivot it into what we can do for the uncrewed space. And it's a benefit to the crew space, right? So really striving to achieve this integrated capability that's both safe and efficient. And the opportunity with SAI gets us into that market very quickly. There are over 200 airports at which this could be deployed at. Don't have them yet. It's going to take a little bit of time, and my team is very rapidly out there in front right now making those deployments happen. And I expect to have some good announcements about those launches here within the next coming months.
So Britt, it's called FlightLine.
Yeah.
And so my question is, because you said it's between cooperative air traffic and also it can detect ground traffic. It frightens me a little bit because I'm thinking airports, I'm thinking, what did they have before? Or did they, because you said maybe underserved smaller airports. Yep. So maybe like when I think of Newark International, they've obviously got something going on there, we hope. But you're filling a gap. Can you explain kind of the gap that you filled? Because in my mind, I just always assumed that they already had something like this.
Sure. Yeah, so there's ASDX, right, which is a program that's been around, and it services the larger airports, and it provides a very similar capability for them to be able to track vehicles, airborne and ground, around airports. And that's a relatively enterprise level capability that's been deployed by the FAA, right? And it's operational today, and it keeps us safe in the skies. Sure. But when you fly into someplace, like our home airport over at Leesburg, or even up in Kalispell, right? You're limited there essentially by the tower, and that's why we have air traffic controllers. And their responsibility is to use the available systems that they have. In some cases, that's radar. In some cases, it's the visual eye, and then the communications with the aircraft themselves to be able to control the airspace and make sure that things don't happen in a bad way. Yeah. Essentially, this then comes in and provides an additional level of support for them by showing them the real-time air traffic in the area from aircraft that are broadcasting on ADSB or via ground vehicles. So, Ops 1 or Ops 2 is out doing a FOD check on the runway, and it happens to be at night. Well, we can now see those vehicles on the runway, and that's something that's provided by what we call a VTU, a vehicle tracking unit, essentially an ADSB broadcaster that goes on the vehicle itself. And more importantly, if you look at some of our partners like ForeFlight, if I have the ability to collect that ADSB traffic in the cockpit, so say via Sentry, right, I can actually then display that on my ForeFlight, my iPad in the cockpit. So I'm in my Cessna 172 coming in for a night landing. Ops 2 is out on the runway doing a FOD check. And yeah, I've worked with controllers all lined up, but I can now get an alert on my iPad that says, hey, there's a vehicle on the runway when you're approaching. right?
Wow.
That
That,
additional situational awareness
yeah.
for the operators, for the pilots, is a significant advance in safety. And it's not that we didn't have things before. It's just that we now have technology that can really help the situation, especially in a case when you've got, you know, significant amount of load on those air traffic controllers in the airports themselves. And we're adding more and more aircraft into the scenario, right? It's not like that's decreasing when you add uncrewed aircraft, crewed aviation, right? There's a real need there to be able to get this in place. And obviously we saw quite a bit of news potential collisions. And so that was a good impetus and opportunity. And the FAA came asking for some help, and we were ready to deliver.
Okay, okay. Wow, a lot going on here, including in the chat, by the way, Brandon. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Greg Larson is saying hello from Augusta, and we also have Living L6S. Hello from California. Lots of love, Dawn. Love right back at you. So thank you so much. Okay, wow, that's incredible, Britt. So as I'm listening to you, you kind of alluded to it, but we're going to talk about the future a lot more later in the show. But you're thinking, layering in UAS into this. As I'm thinking through this, obviously, we see Joby out there, we see Beta Technologies, Lilium, the list goes on of air taxis or electric vertical takeoff and landing or the STOLs and all of these kind of newer aviation aircraft. These will all be layered in at some point, maybe vertiports, maybe airports, what about, and helicopters too?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, helicopters can have, they can be cooperative and have ADS-B out. Many of them do. We have several that actually fly with tail beacons and tail beacon X's as well. So yes, anything that flies essentially that has that type of ability to produce ADS-B can be collected by the ground-based receivers that we have and then displayed back. And uniquely, this FlightLine capability that we have is tailored to the Surface Awareness Initiative, right? Effectively is a cloud application, right? So we deploy hardware that goes on into the field. Essentially, it's two antennas, so there's redundancy that comes back into a cloud-based architecture, and then what the controller uses or the operator uses essentially is a web application, right? So we can very rapidly deploy and inside a tight line window, and it's not a significant cost that's then levied on these operators because essentially they just need to have a screen in the tower, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes it very easy for that data to be available. The other thing that's elemental here is that we own and know the network, right? So we can track the pedigree and the provenance essentially of that ADS-B data, right? So there's a lot of validity that can be brought into that, and we can do certain things with the math that make sure that, yes, that really is a specific aircraft target. We've called that True Sky in the past. That's a module that's a part of FlightLine. And that additional validation of that ADS-B traffic eliminates spoofing and ensures that, yes, I as a controller can trust that data that's there when I'm using it as a part of my situational awareness and I'm using it as a part of my decision-making process, right? So that element is something that we can deliver as a service today, not just to the FAA or airports that are part of the SAI initiative, but it's certainly going to be available to others in the UAS space that are trying to operate at scale, right? And when you try and get to a point where you don't need a visual observer or you just have an electronic observer, this type of technology, this type of service is a core competency we can deliver for you and allow you to go off and do the business that you would like to do, whether that's emergency services, medical supply delivery, or land mapping, whatever it might be that you need.